שתחדש עלינו, שתחדש עלינו, Shana Tova.
Hello there. Are you getting ready for Rosh Hashanah as well? The new year is almost upon us, and that means we get to indulge in some sweet treats to welcome a sweet new year. Shana Tova umituka. May the new year be a sweet year for you. So I thought today we could make a traditional round Rosh Hashanah Challah, and we're going to fill it with some sweet treats inside. All right, so if you want to come along with me, let's get started. So to get started, we're going to need some ingredients. We're going to need some yeast, honey, oil, salt, eggs, and flour. And that's it. Bread is pretty straightforward. The filling is going to have a little extra stuff on the side, and I'm going to give you some options. But let's get started with our actual bread. Best advice I was ever given for figuring out the temperature of water for your yeast to rise is that your finger shouldn't be able to feel it. Basically, if it feels too hot or too cold, it is not tepid. All right, and we're adding these. This is exactly what tiny whisks were invented for. So I want to get that honey and warm water and yeast all dissolved. And then I'm going to set it aside to do its thing. All right, so we need a 1/4 cup of honey. And if you don't have regular honey from a bee or you are a vegan, you can actually do this with date honey, which is the honey being referred to when we talk about the land flowing with milk and honey. The honey they're talking about is actually date honey. So you can use date honey or you can use sugar. You might not want to use a full 1/4 cup of either of those because it'll make it pretty sweet, but you can play around with it and have fun. I mean, baking is meant to be fun. All right, so I've got my honey, and then I'm going to add oil. And there's some interesting ways of interpreting ingredients where honey or sugar is meant to represent chesed or kindness. Oil is meant to represent the light of the Torah. It always rises to the top of water, the top of life. So that's pretty cool. So we're combining Torah and kindness. Our ingredients are so much more than just food. How cool is that? And next we're going to add our egg. And even though I have 3 eggs, I'm actually only going to add 2 of my eggs now because one of them is going to be for my egg wash later. Okay, so here's an egg tip. Don't tap it on the side of the bowl. We're all very tempted to do it because it's angled. You're going to get an eggshell in your bowl if you do it that way, almost guaranteed. Tap it on the table. And if you do get an eggshell in your bowl, here's a pro tip. Use the shell, a piece of the shell, to scoop out the shell in your mix, and the shell sticks to the shell. That's your fun cooking fact for the day. So we added a little bit of chesed. We added the light of Torah with the oil and the egg. Well, I mean, let's think Seder here. The egg symbolizes life. And it's another round thing, like our challah, meant to symbolize the new year. All right, so let's get this mixing. And you know what? If you don't have a stand mixer, I'm very blessed to have one. If you don't have one, like, there is nothing to panic about. Seriously, you can do this with a spoon and a bowl and other people in your kitchen and pass the bowl around. You can make it real fun. It doesn't need to be you alone with the camera and your kitchen mixer, because, I mean, not everyone needs to bake that way, right? All right, about a second to get that mixed. These yolks do not want to break. They're like clinging to being yolks. Now again, if you're vegan, if you don't eat egg, you actually don't need to add egg to bread. Bread will rise just fine on its own. Egg is the thing we think of when it's challah. You could do, instead of an egg wash, you could do a nut milk or an oat milk wash on it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Instead of egg, you could use a flax egg, or you could use a little bit of the whipped chickpea, or you could just not add it. So lots of ways you could substitute it. So my yeast is nice and fluffy now. So I'm going to go ahead and add it in. All my lovely wet ingredients doing what they're supposed to do. I'm going to add some salt. Again, we're getting biblical here. The salt makes us think of the Mishkan or the temple. I'm going to add some salt. Again, we're getting biblical here. The salt makes us think of the Mishkan or the temple. The salt was always associated with sacrifices, very Rosh Hashanah Torah-y. And on a chemical level, the salt actually stops the yeast from over-expanding. That's part of the reason. So salt is flavor, and it also does a chemical reaction with your yeast, so that's pretty cool. And then our flour, grabbed the wrong measuring cup. Okay, so while this is mixing, I'm then going to add, and I'm sorry to do this because I know exactness is fun, you're going to add 3 to 4 cups of flour. And really it has to do with when you think your dough is looking pretty sticky. Okay, and as soon as it's starting to come together, if you are using your mixer, this is when you're going to switch it out. You're going to get in there, you're going to get sticky, get messy, as the fabulous Miss Frizzle would say. And if you don't know who Miss Frizzle is, what are you doing? Get on Netflix. Right after we do this, right after your challah is rising, go watch the Magic School Bus. Miss Frizzle, man, get messy, make mistakes. Miss Frizzle is, I personally feel she was Jewish. You can tell me what you think in the comments below. It doesn't really matter, but I personally thought of her as Jewish in my childhood and like she was my Jewish educator. Okay, and you're gonna switch to your dough hook, so fancy. The mixer. Okay, so this is the consistency we're going for. It's soft, it's a little sticky, but it's holding its shape. So we're gonna let this knead in the mixer for about 5 minutes. If you are doing it by hand, which means you're gonna roll it out, knead it out, fold it over, knead it out, you're gonna do that for about 7 minutes or until it actually just feels smooth and elastic. Okay, so that is looking sticky and elastic, but still soft. So now what I'm gonna do will come off. See there? Looks like dough. It's holding its shape when I pinch it. It's soft, it's kind of smooth, it's not overworked. So this, you have a few choices. Oh, and it's sticking to the bottom of the bowl. You actually want that. That's a really good sign. I can clean the bowl, oil it, and let it rise in here. Or if I want to let it rise really quickly, see how it's nice and sticky in my hand? I'm going to rest it here, and I'm actually going to get a Ziploc bag. Okay, so my Ziploc bag has olive oil in it. And that's going to stop it sticking to the bag. But it's also going to make a bit more of a vacuum seal for the dough to rise. So I'm going to let that sit at room temperature for like 2 hours until it's doubled in size or increased and gotten nice and puffy. My dough is behind me resting. Hopefully yours is too. And now I'm going to make a filling. There's a few different ways you can do this. You can even just, when we roll it out, add some dried fruit like raisins or cranberries or chopped up dates. You could make a fancy reduction with some cooked down dates and balsamic vinegar. Lots of different ways to do this. You want to use fruits and sweet things to honor the sweet season. That's sort of the point of the Rosh Hashanah baked challah with extra goodies in it. I'm going to do something a little bit Canadian though. So while we don't have date honey here in Canada, we do have maple syrup. So I'm just going to free pour a little bit of syrup here. Nice and golden. Ooh. And I'm going to add some extra spices. So I'm just doing a dash of clove a dash of nutmeg, and of powdered sugar. If you do not have the biggest sweet tooth, don't do powdered sugar. You can do a little bit of flour or cornstarch to thicken it up. No need to worry about that. And I'm just trying to make a thick paste. To put in my challah. If you do want to do something savory, you can always do shredded cheese. You can also just do cinnamon sugar. There's lots of complicated or easy ways to make a beautiful filling to go in your Rosh Hashanah Challah. Don't be afraid to taste test. Oh yeah, it's gonna give you toothache. That's fabulous. Okay, hopefully our dough has had enough time to rise. It's looking a little fluffier. Oh, nice and smooth. This is where this guy comes in. This is you can use a sharp knife. This happens to be a bread cutter. This is another baking utensil that I said I did not need or want. Okay, now, there's a few different ways we can do this. I've divided it into 4 because we're going to do a braided challah today. You can use a rolling pin, and I will use one to show you how to use it. And you're going to roll out a rectangle. So this is not like our usual making worms. Okay, and now you can use a spatula. Oh, into my filling, by the way, I added a squirt of lemon because it was just a little too sweet, and now the flavor is a little more balanced. So you can fiddle with your fillings until the very end. So I'm just drizzle, drizzle, drizzle. Now the trick to this is that you want to leave space around the edges because we're gonna roll everything up, and we actually don't want the filling to squirt out of our pieces of braid, because if that happens, it's going to burn in the oven. Few things so frustrating as baking that goes uneven or burns on one side. Super frustrating. So we'll do that again. So we're gonna roll this one out. See how it's sort of an oblong, not a perfect rectangle. We're not looking for perfect geometry here. Really the goal is to create a flat shape that we can add our beautiful filling to help create fun new Rosh Hashanah traditions for your house. In my house growing up, we actually didn't even dip our apples in honey. We dipped them in maple syrup because I didn't really like honey as a kid. So my mom came up with the maple syrup idea, and it's just kind of stuck with me as this Rosh Hashanah fun thing because it's still pretty sweet. All right, and then I take an end and I roll it up like you would do with a cinnamon roll. You don't want it to be too tight because we don't want the filling to squirt out. You want it to be even. So if you have to gently sort of fold it over, that's okay too. And see, so that looks sealed, and if you need to pinch, perfect. I'm actually gonna check on this one to make sure that it's sealed too. Yeah, we want it to be sealed a little more than that. Ooh. Perfect. Now this one, I'm not gonna do the rolling pin method. If you don't like rolling pins, if you have bad experiences with rolling pins, the other way you can do this is to smush. So you use your hand and you make trench. And if you were adding raisins, this is a really good way to do it because it holds your hard ingredients. But I can also use it to pour in my filling. So both ways are perfectly fine They both have their upsides, they both have their perks, they both have their pitfalls. I personally find it a little harder to seal this one up or to get the best distribution of filling. So I prefer it if I'm doing something like adding raisins or adding cheese. By the way, adding cheese to your challah is delicious, and it doesn't need to be Rosh Hashanah to do that. So we pull and pinch. And then sort of the goal is you want to be able to actually roll it out without losing your filling. And this is where the burns can happen. That's okay. If it does start to burn in the oven, cover it with some tin foil. All will be well. You will still have a joyous Rosh Hashanah. In case you missed it, we're going to do this version one more time. So roll. Now, this is where we're actually going to get into the braiding part. Oh, I'm sorry that you're struggling there, friend. It's okay. You're going to be okay. So we are going to do a basket weave. So I'm going to lay 2 pieces vertical. And we're going to, it's like we're on Twitter or Instagram. We're going to make a hashtag. Right? See? Made a beautiful hashtag. Hashtag Machane Shabbat. Hashtag Morajeni. Hashtag Rosh Hashanah. Hashtag Challah. Lots of hashtags here. And if you are not following Machane Shabbat on Instagram to get your storytime updates and your video updates and your Orhan Shema updates, what are you doing? Pause your video and go do that. I'll even put a link for you in the doobly-doo. Yeah, you. Okay, and now we're going to fiddle with our hashtag because what we actually want is a basket weave. Okay, so anyone here who recognizes a pattern, you're going to see that there's over and under and under and over. Okay, and we're going to kind of make a windmill. So every piece I grab, I'm going to grab the next piece, go over, grab the piece next to it and go over, over. And I'm back at the start. And now I'm going to change directions. So I'm still grabbing the piece next to it, but rather than going this way, I'm going to go back on myself. So I'm going to go over, over, grabbing the next piece, going over, grabbing the next piece, going over. Okay? Same again. I'm grabbing this piece, but I'm not going to go over this way. I'm going to come back again. So I'm going over, next piece, over, next piece, over, next piece, over. And this is the trickiest part. Once you get the hang of it, you'll never forget it, but it is initially tricky. So you're going to take your first 2 pieces and tuck them under. And you're going to tuck them under and tuck them under and tuck them under. And then you're going to do a little swirl around with your hands. If you've ever made pizza dough, it feels very similar. All right, so we've got our tray. Scraper, pick it up from the bottom, dump it on the tray. Okay, so we can see that there are some sticky spots where stuff has split. We're going to have to live with that, and that's okay. Baking is all about getting messy and making mistakes. Remember, Miss Frizzle, we talked about this already. So that third egg, it's time to crack it and whisk it. You don't need to add water or milk. You can just use the egg. You can use the solitary egg yolk if you feel like being super traditional. There are lots of different folklores about which part of the egg is best for the glaze. I just use the whole egg. So we do a double egg wash. My first egg wash is right as it's going into its second rise, and I'm going to do one more egg wash right before I put it in the oven. Okay, so now this needs its second proofing. I'm going to let it sit. You can cover it with a wet towel. Honestly, you can also just leave it open. You're fine. Nothing bad is going to happen. This, after about an hour, is going to go in the oven at 350 degrees, depending on your oven. 350 is a good benchmark. If your oven's a little cool, do 375. Convection oven, 350 is fine. That's what I have. And you're going to bake it for 35 minutes. Or if you have a thermometer, you're going to bake it until the internal temperature is over 197. Okay, let's see how it goes. And there we have it. You can see all the golden braids coming together. I'm going to slice into it in a second, and we're going to see all the beautiful layers that have formed with the filling inside. So I really do hope that you try this. As you can see from the recipe, it is not complicated, it just takes a little fiddly patience. You can definitely try it. And if you do, please post your pictures and send them to emails that I will put in the description below so that we can include them on our Or HaNeshama and Machane Shabbat Instagram. And if you haven't yet, oh my goodness, please sign up to get your newsletters so that you can get our activity backpacks for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, full of activities like this with more baking videos, more songs, more stories. Well, I hope you have a Shana Tova U'Metuka, and until next time, Lehitraot. We're going to do that classic thing that you would never do if you were eating this bread. You can see the steam coming out, the ribbons of the maple blended in, and I'm actually gonna steal a little slice here so you can zoom in and see that maple syrup all dripped in. It blended in so beautifully. You can film about it.